From being the most decorated heavyweight in UFC history to the way he's respectful despite being so dominant. Here's why fighters are terrified of Stipe Miocic. The man is literally the best heavyweight in UFC history. And I don't care what John Jones has been up to. Even if he beats Miocic, he ain't getting close to his legacy. Look at all he's achieved during his peak in the UFC. And no one else can claim to dominate the promotion like he did, fighting in the toughest heavyweight era ever. Up until 2020, he had a 20 out of 3 record, which is honestly absurd when you look at some of the names he fought. That loss to Francis Ngannou in 2023 doesn't qualify as a loss. I mean, it does on the official record, but Stipe was nowhere near his best, and fighting's become a side hustle for him now. Only Stefan Struve, Junior Dos Santos, and Daniel Cormier have ever gotten a W over peak Stipe, and that's crazy. The heavyweight division is the hardest to fight in. One punch and the fight's over. So, to have a record like Miocic does, which basically includes wins over both Cormier and Dos Santos, after his loss, goes to show that no one's actually better than him. Even Ngannou can claim he got a win over the legend. But fact is, Stipe destroyed him back in 2018, when both of them were very much in their primes. Only Struve has a winning record against Miocic, and he had a lot of things going for him, like his 7-foot frame and considerable luck that night. Miocic leads the UFC in title defenses at heavyweight, and having defeated plenty of former and future champs, there can't be a better heavyweight than him. And given some of the names he's defeated, it's not a shock that fighters are terrified by the mention of his name. Is there a resume better than Stone Cold's in UFC history? Check out any list of the top 10 greatest heavyweights of all time, and Miocic has a win over at least 7 or 8 of them. Plenty of wins over DC, Ngannou, Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, you name it. Most young heavyweights look up to these names, and they've all been silenced by the silencer. That's how good he is. And when you've built a reputation for taking out the greatest names in the sport, then you deserve respect. To his credit, Stipe doesn't think he's the scariest name in the promotion, and he certainly doesn't come across as one either. You'd think someone who tore Overeem to shreds would be a menace, but Miocic is one of the nicest fellas in the promotion's history. He was asked if he's the scariest fighter in the world ahead of his first fight against Ngannou, because many believed that taking a fight against the Cameroonian was a bad idea. Miocic let the world know he wasn't the scariest around, but he was definitely the baddest man, proving it by getting a win over the future heavyweight champ. Defeating big names isn't the only metric for greatness. It's how comfortable he looked in those wins that scares the crap out of fighters. For instance, look at his bout against Mark Hunt. Now, Hunt was a problem, and many expected a routine win for him over Stipe when these two met all those years ago. Not only did the silencer turn the tables on Hunt and win comfortably, but he also ended that era with a one-sided win. Everyone knew there was a new sheriff in town, and he was nothing like they'd ever seen before. Out of his first 18 wins, he won 14 by knockout finishes, something that he isn't even known for. Do you know how absurd that is? My favorite win has to be the one over Andrei Arlovski. The man had no idea what to do against Stipe, and he was caught in the middle of nowhere. But Stone Cold put him out of his misery with a punch that was heard all across the world. That set him up for a title shout against Fabricio Werdum, and I have to say somehow, that punch was even better. This ease with which Miocic fights and wins is unseen and unheard of. He did the same against Overeem and Dos Santos, and if you've followed the UFC a little bit, you'll know how big these names really are. What makes things even more interesting is how he loves ending fights in the first round. Cause who even has the time to come back for another round? My man got fires to put out and all that. But you can't be this good without being super intelligent and incredibly skillful. Sheer power can help you have a brilliant career for a long time in the UFC. Most of the big-name heavyweights rely on that alone, but not Miocic. He's not driven by raw power. Stipe's got the skill set of a lightweight because he's got a background that others can't rival. He was an all-star wrestler in Cleveland State and became a boxer, competing in the National Golden Gloves before starting his mixed martial arts career. That tells you how diverse his firepower is and all of the things he brings to the canvas. Of course, it's helped a lot by his size, strength, technique, fluid grappling, and elite striking. Compare him to Jones, for instance. That man has no weaknesses. He's up there among the all-time greats too, but he won't ever have a skill set as diverse as Miocic. This combination of skills makes him impossible to defeat. Cause, think about it, how do you fight someone who can bring out a dozen ways of putting you back on the floor? Don't get me wrong, power is still the most important thing a heavyweight needs, but it doesn't guarantee you wins, like Ngannou found out the hard way. If you want to win, you've got a better chance if you're more skillful than powerful, especially in the UFC, against the best MMAs in the world. No one believed this to be true in the heavyweight division, but Miocic proved it, particularly after his win over Francis, when he draped over his back, forcing him to carry the load. That's called being smart, and this is just one of the many marquee qualities he's got as a fighter. If you want to be a big name in the UFC, you've got to be talented. Stipe's as talented as they come. You've got to be dominant. Again, I'm sure you can't name many fighters that dominated the UFC like Miocic did. Most important of all, you've got to have a little bit of flair and charisma. Can you name any heavyweight with more charisma than Stipe? Jones comes close, yes, but look at all the controversies he's been involved in. Miocic is literally a firefighter. The coolest job in the world, bar none. That's why fans absolutely adore him, which helps in building a reputation hard to rival. And once you've got keyboard warriors fighting your case on social media, you're the GOAT, even if you're not the GOAT. I'm not saying he's got an aura like Brock Lesnar's, or a dominance in the same vein as Cain Velasquez, but he's closer to those two in these aspects than they are in everything else compared to Stipe. Overall, he comes out on top, and not many can rival him. I mean, if analysts believe that a 40-year-old Stipe is the best chance of stopping Jon Jones, then that should tell you how good he really is. For the record, I doubt Jones will lose to Stipe in UFC 295, but the fact it's still a little too close to call. With Stipe in his 40s, that's insane. If he comes out on top in UFC 295, it'll just be another feather in his hat in the GOAT debate. If he doesn't, it won't change anything, because he's the greatest anyway. Think of it this way, even Jones believes that a win over Stone Cold would advance his legacy, to the point where he wants that to be his final fight in the promotion. I don't blame him for thinking like that. Stipe's only been beaten by Father Time, the only unbeaten champ ever. 40-year-old firefighter. That's how most of the new generation of fans knows Miocic. Yet he's the only fighter in the world who stands a chance against this version of Jon Jones. No wonder other fighters in the promotion don't want to handle that smoke. But there's another very good reason behind that as well. He's the golden standard, because he's so respectful of everyone, despite being the most dominant heavyweight ever. You'd think a little bit of trash talk is required if you want to make it in the UFC, but Miocic does things the way he wants. Imagine being a potential opponent of Stipe's. You know he's going to batter and bruise you, but will also shake your hand after the fight and praise you. I don't know about you, but that's scarier than someone trash talking and losing his temper. So from respecting the competition despite dominating it, to being the most decorated heavyweight in UFC history, this was why fighters are terrified of Stipe Miocic.